Hi everyone, welcome to our PowerPoint on legal writing style. This is a little bit different from grammar. Grammar has some straightforward rules about what is grammatically correct and incorrect. Legal writing style is a little bit different. What I'm going to talk about in this PowerPoint are issues in legal writing where the writing is grammatically correct. We just prefer a different style in how we convey ourselves in legal writing. So none of this should be perfected on your first time of doing legal writing. As we move through the semester, we'll talk about how this type of writing and editing is a stage that comes later in our writing after we've already expressed our ideas, and we're going back through our writing to make sure we are being clear, we are being concise, we are being as straightforward as possible, and these are just ways to accomplish that. But by no means do I expect you to sit down and write this way the very first time you write something. In fact, I will stress upon you my own writing approach is that usually when I sit down to do any type of writing that requires some thought and some thinking, I tend to get all my ideas out on paper, even if the sentences are horrible and not perfect. I just want to get my thoughts down on paper. And then from there, I can take a paragraph that I've written or 3 or 4 sentences that I've written, and at a much later stage, I can go back through sentence by sentence, paragraph by paragraph, and do what I'm going to talk about on this PowerPoint. Make sure I'm using active voice. Make sure I'm not using legalese and legal phrases that is confusing or misleading. Make sure I'm not being redundant and repetitive in my writing. That's not something I'm going to do on my first go. I'm going to be much more focused on the content and what it is that I'm writing, and then later I can go back through and do this editing. So that's why I do these PowerPoints at the beginning of the semester, because I want to set some guidance for you as we move through our writing. But know that this is just part of the editing and the writing stage. So the first one I'm going to talk about is the difference between using active voice and using passive voice. Some of you may have heard about this before, and if you haven't, that's okay too. I, again, don't expect you to be experts on all of these areas of writing. In the law, we generally prefer using the active voice. Now, what this means is making sure that it is the actor in our sentence leading the doing of the sentence, whatever the action is. So let me give you a couple of examples where there is not active voice. Let's look at the first one. The meeting was held by the corporate officers. So I'll ask you a question. Who's the actor in the sentence? The meeting was held by the corporate officers. You're probably thinking the corporate officers. So when we use passive voice, we are not leading with the actor, we're leading with the doing of the sentence. How about this one? The argument for acquittal was made by the defendant's attorney. Again, who's the actor? It's the defendant's attorney. So in both of these sentences, both of these are passive voice, by the way. In both of these sentences, where is the actor appearing? The actor's appearing at the very end of the sentence. We're kind of burying who's doing the work here. In the legal profession, we prefer to turn these around and make the actor the leader of the sentence. So instead of saying the meeting was held by the corporate officers, we would say the corporate officers held the meeting. Instead of saying the argument for acquittal was made by the defendant's attorney, we would flip it and we would say the defendant's attorney made an argument for acquittal. Now, again, grammatically, these sentences are perfectly intact. It's more of a style of using the actor as the leader. Here's an even more complicated example. This is a true sentence. Take a look at this. A copy of every action letter shall be sent to the clerk of the administrative office for entry and filing, and a memorandum briefly describing the action letter shall be distributed to each commissioner within 3 days thereafter. I'll just ask you to pause this and consider this question. Who's the actor in this sentence? I think you can see by reading a sentence like this that writing in passive voice leads to a couple of big problems. The first one is lack of clarity. So using passive voice is not very helpful in legal writing when we're trying to be really clear. When we use active voice by leading with the actor, we end up with stronger, more forceful writing, better comprehension, and the added benefit of fewer words. Now you might think, why does that matter? But in legal writing, we tend to want to be more concise. Now this may strike you as odd. I studied as an undergraduate, I studied political science, and I wrote a lot of research papers. And every single one of my research papers was given a page minimum, like write a minimum of 5 pages or 10 pages or 15 pages. The legal profession, despite what we might think, actually works backwards. We want to say what is most important in the fewest words possible. Writing a paragraph or writing 7 or 8 sentences when you can write the same thing in 2 or 3 is actually preferred. And for some court filings, there's actually page maximums. The court doesn't want to see more than 10 pages of argument, and they'll stop reading after 10 pages, or they won't even accept your document. So we want to use active voice because it's clearer who's doing the acting, and it also leads to fewer words and better comprehension. A really easy example might be like, my homework was eaten by the dog. That's a lot. My homework was eaten by the dog. That's 7 words. What if we switch it to, my dog ate the homework? My dog ate the homework. It's only 5 words. I know that doesn't sound like a big difference, 5 words versus 7, but when you're writing many pages in a row, those extra words will add up, and they're not adding anything to your writing. So let's work on using active voice in our writing. I will actually start to point this out to you in your writing as well. So that's the benefits of active voice. Can you ever use passive voice? Yes. Yes, it's not that we don't ever use it, but we're really strategic when we use passive voice in legal writing. We do it when we actually are intentionally trying to take the attention away from the actor. So checks were deposited in the defendant's bank account. The knife was held by the defendant. In the past month, the fence was cut into 3 times. Maybe our client is the defendant in an action, and we just want to deflect attention away from that actor. These sentences, again, are perfectly grammatically correct, but you can see that these are written in the passive voice to take the attention away from who the actor is. But again, I come back to what I said at the beginning of these slides, which is, generally speaking, we do use the active voice, and I will start to point that out to you in your own writing. Okay. The other big piece of legal writing that I want to mention is avoiding legalese. Please, I implore you, and that's a good legal word too, but I beg of you to not use words that you don't know the meaning of. And we are really, really all guilty of this in the law. We like to use words that sound important, that sound legal, but often it leads to confusion. And we can just use regular words. Like, we don't have to say subsequent to our meeting. What can we say instead? After the meeting. Try to avoid words like herewith, herein, forthwith. It doesn't mean you won't see them in other legal writing. Absolutely, you will see it. But I strongly believe that speaking and writing in regular English language leads to clarity and avoiding us trying to sound like we know something different. Just use regular words. The witness opined that? Yeah, the witness gave an opinion, but we can just say thinks that or gives his opinion. Something a little bit straightforward will help. So try to avoid using legalese. One caveat here is that sometimes terms of art are required in the law. For example, some court standards include something like an undue burden. When the legalese is a defined term in the law, something like undue burden, that's just an easy example, then we do want to use those words. But otherwise, the rest of the time, just regular English language. The last one I want to make you aware of is avoiding lots of extra words. This goes back to something I said a few minutes ago, which is that we count our words in the law. We don't want to just throw in extra words to make our writing longer. It doesn't help us to make our writing any longer. We just want to be straightforward. So here's one of my favorite that I see all the time is, it is important to note that. We love to use this in our legal writing. It is important to note that the defendant arrived on a Tuesday or something like that. Here's my hint. If you're writing it in your legal writing, it already is important. You don't have to begin a sentence with "it is important to note that," or "due to the fact that," or "despite the fact that." Just remove those phrases altogether and say whatever it is you want to say. I promise that will make your writing clearer and more concise and more direct. So here's just an example of just what I would call empty words, because they just don't add anything to your writing except making it needlessly longer. Before I move off of this PowerPoint, I actually wanted to show you what I have linked for you on your Blackboard page that I think would be really helpful. In a folder called Handouts, Legal Writing Style, I have some extra handouts on legalese, words to avoid, some sentences that use legalese, and you'll see how not helpful it is, and what I was showing you on that last slide, which is avoiding needless words and avoiding redundancy. I know that all of this is not something that we're used to. We're used to writing as much as possible, making our writing longer. But throughout this semester, we're going to work really hard on using active voice, being concise in our writing, and being clear. Again, none of this is grammar, but it is related to legal writing style. So take a minute and look at these handouts, because I think they'll be helpful and they'll give you some examples of what not to do and maybe what to do instead. Lastly, before I leave here, I just wanted to kind of overview and give you, just remember to look through. You don't have to memorize any of this, but this is the Oxford comma case that I've referred to before, and handouts about other pleadings and some links for you to look at. But take a look at all of it that's here, and if you have any questions about grammar, certainly let me know, or if you have questions about the legal writing style and how to use it and what is the best way to express yourself, let me know. But I hope that gives you a little bit of a precursor about what we'll be looking for in making our writing stronger throughout the semester.